How are you all doing? My name's Catherine McGinty, and I would like to welcome you all here to today's event. There's no British Justice, which has been held as part of the commemorative events for the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, January the 30th, 1972. Now, today's event is co-hosted by the Bloody Sunday March Committee and the Truth and Reconciliation Platform. The Truth and Reconciliation Platform was founded in 2016, and it describes itself as providing a platform for victims of the so-called Troubles to speak about their personal experiences, to warn the world of the real consequences of using or accepting violence as a means to bring about change. At the start of today's meeting, we're going to, as all the events of the weekend, we're going to begin with a reading of the names of the dead of Bloody Sunday and have a minute's silence. Then we're going to hear a video message from the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights. Unfortunately, today, Eugene Reevy is unable to join us. He is a member of the Truth and Reconciliation Forum. Eugene's brother, Anthony, it's his anniversary tomorrow, and Eugene just didn't feel up to it, which I think we can understand. So Liam Ray is going to join us, who's a member of the Bloody Sunday relative, is a Bloody Sunday relative, whose brother Jim was murdered on Bloody Sunday. And we also have Joe Campbell from the Truth and Reconciliation Platform, whose father, RUC Sergeant Joseph Campbell, was shot dead in February 1977. When everyone has spoken, we'll have a Q&A, so you can type your questions into the chat box. That would be brilliant. So I think, Stephen, we'll hand it over to you. You're going to read the names of the dead, and we'll have a commemorative minute's silence before we start.
Okay, Catherine, thank you. So in memory of those 13 who were shot and killed on Bloody Sunday, and the 14th person who died of his injuries some months later, Jackie Duddy, James Ray, Gerald Donaghy, Michael McDade, Bernard McGuigan, Hugh Gilmore, Gerard McKinney, John Young, Patrick Doherty, William Nash, Kevin McElhinney, Michael Kelly, William McKinney, and John Johnston.
We'll now have a minute's silence. Thank you. So in starting today, I suppose the central discussion today is around the current British government's draft of proposals regarding the implementation of a statute of limitations for all conflict-related deaths. So should Boris Johnson's Conservatives successfully push through these measures, all the families who have lost anyone as a result of the conflict across these islands will effectively have no legal route or redress left open to them in the pursuit of truth and justice on behalf of their loved ones. So that's a discussion today, and I think we're going to begin, Stephen, with the video message from the UN Rapporteur on Human Rights.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and then I'll introduce the speaker, sure then. I can't hear that. So can other people hear it?
No.
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 Hold on, let's just check it up here. Where did we get it before?
Supervising and monitoring processes of transitional justice and their compliance with international human rights law standards. As part of conduct country visits. I am the special rapporteur on the promotion of truth, justice, reparations, and guarantees of non-recurrences of the United Nations. So my main role is focused on dealing with the past issues, supervising and monitoring processes of transitional justice and their compliance with international human rights law standards. As part of the mandate, I conduct country visits, provide technical assistance, and I report each year to the Human Rights Council and to the UN General Assembly. Because the UK proposal, I sent a communication to the United Kingdom government, and I have expressed serious concern about the plan to ban all prosecutions, impede investigations, and preclude victims' civil claims in connection with the troubles in Northern Ireland, which would effectively institute a de facto amnesty and blanket impunity for the grave human rights violations committed during that period. The proposal will ban all conflict-related prosecutions through the introduction of a statute of limitation to apply equally to all troubles-related incidents. It would not apply to cases already adjudicated, but under the proposal, the police service and the police ombudsman of Northern Ireland would be statutorily barred from investigating troubles-related incidents, and judicial activity would be ended across the spectrum of criminal cases and current and future civil cases and inquests. This would effectively also preclude coronial inquests and victims' claims in civil courts. The proposal will bring an immediate end to criminal investigations into troubles-related offenses and remove the prospect of prosecutions. That forecloses the pursuit of justice and accountability for the serious human rights violations committed during the troubles and frustrate victims' rights to truth and to an effective remedy for the harm suffered, placing the United Kingdom in flagrant violations of its international obligations. If you can see the guidelines and the standards on accountability, you can see my last report presented this year to the Human Rights Council on that issue. Reconciliation never, ever is a consequence of impunity. Criminal justice is an essential pillar of transitional justice processes alongside truth seekings. I would like to recall the importance of adopting a comprehensive approach in a transitional justice processes that incorporates the full range of judicial and non-judicial measures. The essential components of a transitional justice approach, truth, justice, reparation, memorialization, and guarantees of non-recurrences cannot be traded off against one another in a pick and choose exercise. The truth is both an individual and a collective rights. Victims and society have the rights to truth, and all proposals must have the consideration for the victims and their full consent according to the international standards. The state must adopt measures for establishing the full extent of the truth about the human rights violations perpetrated during the troubles and about the circumstances, reasons, and responsibilities that led to them. Concerning apologies, the framework for the provision of public apologies is again the international human rights law. And you can find some guidelines on the nature and content of the apology, the responsibilities acknowledged in relation to the violations committed, the author and context of the apology, and the consultation with victims in the design of the apology in my report presented to the United Nations General Assembly in October 2019. You can find it in the website of the mandate. I express also concern because the lack of clarity concerning the role that victims will play in the design, implementation, and monitoring of the proposed transitional justice institutions and measures, including those relating to memorialization, archiving, and truth recovery, and how their full and effective participation will be warranted. Truth, justice, full reparation, warranties of non-recurrences, and memorialization processes are not a choice. They are international obligation. And just following the way of the international human rights law, the reconciliation and a solid and just peace will be reached. I thank you very much.
Thank you. So truth and reconciliation can't be achieved through immunity. We're taken out of that. Before I ask Liam to speak, I'd just like to apologise, Grania, for, Grania Taggart of Amnesty International. Unfortunately, I should have said at the start, Grania has sent her apologies. She was unable to join us today. But Liam, you're going to be speaking first. Liam lost his brother Jim on Bloody Sunday, and Liam is a long-standing campaigner for justice for the murder of his brother and a member of the Bloody Sunday March Committee. So Liam, how are you reflecting on Bloody Sunday, 50 years on? And you're muted, Liam. Liam, you're muted. You're muted. Your mic is muted.
Sometimes that's the best
That's
way.
grand off. That's good. Hiya.
50 years on, obviously
Yeah.
it's got a deeper connotation because like all anniversaries are special, but 50 years has its own emotional impact. And reflecting back in 50 years, what happened to my brother and the other victims on that day, one who was a personal friend and one who was another acquaintance. And I don't look back with any great sense of joy that we've moved that much more forward in regards to what we say in regards to British justice or the lack thereof, and particularly what happened with the Soldier F prosecution case, and in regards now to what Boris Johnson is proposing, the statute of limitations, and regards to paramilitaries, security service, etc., that the PSNA will be statutorily restricted or stopped from investigating those crimes, that civil actions will not take place, and that coroner's inquests will be stopped as well. And I look back and thinking of that, and I thought to myself, where have we come from 1968 until 2022? And I think we have regressed rather than improved in any degree or manner. My experience when it comes to justice, when we campaigned right through the years up until 1998, when under Tony Blair's premiership that they called a new inquiry, that wasn't what we campaigned for. Our third demand was never a demand for an inquiry. Our third demand was for the prosecution of those who were responsible for the murders and the attempted murders of our relatives and friends. We got an inquiry. We got an inquiry under the same 1921 Public Evidence Act that we got on the Widger inquiry in 1972, and we've seen how flawed that was, and that's been generous saying flawed. The inquiry, the Bloody Sunday inquiry, was its conclusions in 2010, only told us what we'd been telling them for years, that our relatives were murdered. Now, their terminology was when circumstances were unjustified and unjustifiable. Murder was a word that couldn't express in totality. And it was like a crumb being thrown off the table to you, sort of, in a sense. My view, it was, there you got something now go away. Well, the hunger that I have for justice for my brother and those other victims in the day, and for countless victims since that time, And even before that time, when I think of young Annette McGavigan, Desi Beattie, Seamus Cusick, I could go through the list of them. That crumb off the table did not satisfy my hunger for justice, nor will it. The inquiry lacked so much. Its scope was so limited. We were caught in a situation where that's what you were given. For a public inquiry, there was at least, I would say 60% of the witnesses were anonymous. They were granted immunity for prosecution for what they said. They were granted screening, and quite a few documents were redacted and other ones at IP certificates put on them, interest immunity certificates. Now, I'm looking at that inquiry, and where we're going now was Boris Johnson's proposals. I'm saying that that inquiry was all the protections that were put in place, that the truth would come out, didn't facilitate the truth, because those military and police personnel that came before the inquiry were protected. They didn't tell the truth. Most of their answers were no recollection, I shot a gunman. So it didn't bring out the truth with all those protections. What Boris Johnson suggested in his information retrieval, information recovery, which has no statutory powers to compel people to tell the truth, is a nonsense. It's to hide the truth. So we look at what's really going on here and maybe think a great detail about it. I don't want to go into the whole legalistic matters about it because I'm not a legalistic person. But what I'm telling you, what the truth is, we look at why are we where we are after 50 years. And the only reason that I can see is now that because of the inquiry, the Bloody Sunday inquiry, and because of the inquest into the Ballymurphy people and other things in regards to the Finucane situation, that the British establishment now, and that's what I'll call them, and I've reason for saying that, the British establishment, I'm going right up from police to prosecution, to judges, to the military, and to the halls of government, the wee cabals in the back rooms. They are hiding now because they've got frightened, because they found out that the ordinary person is not as subservient or honest, intelligent as they thought. We have tweaked things, we've exposed things. Now we're looking at, you have the Canova inquiry going to proceed, and that is a hornet's nest. That is a poison chalice for the British government, where state force agents were responsible for the murder of our citizens, and they protected them. We've seen it with the Pat Finucane inquiry now, and that's opened up doors. And there is a smell of fear coming from Downing Street and within military intelligence that what might be exposed or turned. So the whole process that Boris Johnson is trying to put in place is trying to stop that, to deny ordinary citizens the right under the law. And the only purpose of it, make no mistake it, is to protect British agents' involvements in murder, conspiracy to murder, brutality, torture, and in some ways orchestrating the war in brackets that was happening in the last 10 or 15 years. So what do we do about it? Why do we accept it? How can we change it? My big worry here is we have at this current time, we have what the claim is that all the political parties in Northern Ireland are united in their front against this legislation coming in. And that sounds good. And that sounds healthy. And that sounds, oh, well, this isn't going to happen. But the truth being, my concern here is that the end game, if Boris brings this in, the British government brings this in, and all the parties here challenge it, and then you go into legal proceedings that go on and on and on. Why was the Bloody Sunday case, why the Ballymurphy cases all going through as legacy cases? They're legacy because nobody done anything about them at the time. The police service didn't do it, the public prosecution didn't do it, the forensic people didn't do it. How did the Birmingham 6 and the Guildford 4s and Maguire family spend so long in prison when anybody with a modicum of common sense knew it wasn't injustice? When we know that the police services in England in regards to the Birmingham 6, and particularly Guildford 4, knew within a year that if they had to know that they're wrong people. So we're fighting a monolith, you know, a real monster here. And working class, ordinary people have a mountain decline. And the only way we can do that is by focusing as much as we can, united in solidarity and challenging. This is challenging your politicians. I lived and hoped for the day that in Northern Ireland, that we would have politicians in power who would have integrity and decency, that would change things and move things on. People in my community, and some of them who when they were interned, I marched for release, to release them. Some of them in prison came out. I marched for the abuse that was happening in prisons at the time. And some of them now are in power and sitting on police boards and justice committees, yet I haven't seen anything change. It's the same old, and when you go and say, what has changed from 72 to 2022? Where was the redress? Where's the accountability? All have got excuses. So what I would say is we need to be wide awake, alert to what's happening here. I think that this society has regressed in regards to accountability within the police, within the prosecution service, within the judiciary, and within government. How we fix that is, I think, the first thing we have to do, and I've gone on too long. Tell me, Catherine.
You're okay.
We have to
You're
get
okay.
we have to get through our heads. And I'll give you one
Right.
example. My wee resistance and my way, what I can do when I can do it. I've been at court, at the magistrate court, when the Soldier F prosecutions were starting. I never stood up for one of those judges. I'm not calling any judge your worship. I only worship one thing, and it doesn't that judge sitting in that seat. Now, I'm not saying all judges are bad, but the whole context is put in place right away where you know your place. And it is frustrating. We sat in Derry Courthouse for 4 court hearings, the first 4 court hearings at the Magistrates Court. And at the end of each of those hearings, we had to go into a separate room for people to tell us what happened in that courthouse because we couldn't hear. And we were told, well, it sounds bad. That was how serious, and that's how important the relatives of those there. You couldn't hear the proceedings, and that was fine. The PPS, until the families put forward a submission that it should be heard in Derry Court, we're happy for it to happen in Belfast because that suited them. They didn't have to travel. Everything was set up that you were the least in the food chain. And it's about time we got together and all these bodies. And I recognize this, not just for the victims that are in my community, but there's victims out there. Was 2 people shot dead in the Shankill by the Paras in 72. There's other occasions. We know that paramilitaries working within loyalist organizations are controlled by British agents and by the security forces. And what we have to do now is reaffirm ourselves. And I think the first place we go is solidarity by ourselves and pressing and questioning and asking our politicians to get the job done right, not to be bluffing us, not to be we're all united together, but by the time this is resolved by legal matters, that then it's all legacy. You know what I mean? All witnesses have died, time to destroy documents. Now, I know it might be a lot long, but I'm looking through now just at what's happened in the 50 years that I have lived through that period of time. You had the FRU, Forward Research Unit, that changed to the 14th Intelligence Unit. These were all people, we know what happened in the Dublin Morning bombings, we know what the Glen Ann gang, we know all these things. The ordinary people know them, but the agencies of the state are telling us, well, we can't really do anything here. What a nonsense. So it's time, it's a wake-up call now. Well, all Boris has done is given us a wake-up call to know where we are. And I think it's about time we told Boris where he is and our thinking and what we're going to do about it. So I know it's a bit long-winded.
No, you're fine.
But I would like somebody else to carry on.
Okay, Liam, thank you. So really what I'm taking out of what you're saying, Liam, like you started off with a very pertinent question. Where have we come from between 1968 and 1922? We've regressed and not progressed. And in terms of this amnesty, the working class people involved are fighting a monster. That's
Yeah.
just it in a nutshell. Liam, thank you very much. Joe, are you ready? The next speaker now we have is Joe Campbell. And Joe is a member of the Truth and Reconciliation Platform. Joe is the son of RUC Sergeant Joseph Campbell, who was shot dead in February 1977 outside his police station in Cushendall, County Antrim, by loyalists. And Joe describes himself as true to the values of his late father. He has, from the very beginning, rejected all calls for retaliation against the perpetrators and continues to pursue justice through the courts. Joe, what are your reflections then on this weekend? What would you like to say?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to contribute today. I'm honoured. And just to reflect on that day on the 30th of January 1972, a lot of people will know the detail, but there are some maybe listening today who don't. 26 unarmed civilians were shot at a peaceful protest. 14 were murdered. And when you reflect on it, this massacre does not define Derry or its people. What does define many of the people in Derry is the dignity, the perseverance, the humility to achieve truth and justice for those who were killed, those that were lost, and many people affected even to this day. And let me say at the very outset of this that I support all victims and survivors impacted by what is known as the Troubles and their efforts to achieve truth and justice. Trauma doesn't leave people. It gets worse as the year goes on, as the years go on. It affects them every day of their lives, and it's generational. And I think it's worth just reflecting on that. But, when you reflect of the enormity of what happens and the impact on individuals, families, extended families, communities and society, you just wonder how it could all have happened. But we were all brought up to understand and know what's right and wrong. So what we do is we defer to, in a normal society, to the state to fix things that have gone wrong. But sadly, in the so-called democracy that we live in, this has not happened for all of us. The state has denied that these things happened. They deflect, use spurious reasons to try and avoid focus on what happened. And then, if you can get into any sort of inquiry, I'm talking about ombudsmans, you look at Stalker, you look at Stevens, all that really happens there is that they give people false hope. And what happens if you get a chance of getting to an inquest, a civil action, or even a criminal action, what you get from the state is a delay. So that delay sullies the foundation of democracy, alleged democracy. Criminal, civil justice, inquests just don't happen for people. And the reason for that is that the state wants to hide the truth about their role in the North, and they also want to avoid accountability. The organisation that I work for, along with Stephen Travers and Eugene Regan, my very good friends, really just wants to give people a voice, victims and survivors who don't have a voice, and there are hundreds out there. We all know some of the main victims groups. I hate using that word, because for any of us who've been involved in any of this over the years, we don't like to see ourselves as victims. because you almost admit that you're beaten when you say you're a victim, but I've realized that that's wrong. We're victims and we're survivors. And the survivor part of us keeps us going to try and achieve some truth and justice for the family members that we all lost. I'm also involved in a cross-community group that has been at the House of Commons twice. And I just want to reflect on something that Liam said about the political parties. I stood outside the House of Commons with representatives of most of the political parties in the North. And honestly, it was the first time since what we know as the Troubles started, that all of the political parties were united in one thing. I understand that's for different reasons. I'm not a fool. But they were united in their opposition to what Boris Johnson has proposed. I give great credit to my friend Raymond McCord. We were a cross-community group. And I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say that Raymond and anybody else who has an issue with the state is entitled to truth, civil, criminal, justice, and a proper inquest. One of the issues that comes out is that for some of the inquiries that were set up, that security personnel have not been compelled to give evidence and to support the inquiry. Now, I understand all the arguments that can be put up to support that, but you just think to yourself that, you know, society and democracy is to mean anything. People who swore an oath to whoever to dedicate their lives to the whole community, you would think that there would be a moral compass for them to speak up and to tell what they know. So those who are involved in wrongdoing, and we have to hold the state, the security forces to a higher level, those who are involved should be ashamed. They're avoiding justice. But those who knew and who turned and looked the other way are equally as guilty. You would hope that as the years go on, that people who know what happened and who've got evidence that can help give truth and justice, that people would come forward. Now, the campaigns that have been going on, and I think one of the issues that we have in the North is that there are many victims and survivors. And when we get hit with an issue like this, it's going to pull the rug out from underneath us all. We're all doing different things and good work to try and oppose what's happened. I mean, we've certainly been in the House of Commons. I can tell you this, that the only political party, we lobbied MPs across the UK in the House of Commons, the only political party that was not represented and that chose not to attend the two meetings that we held was the Tory party. We had representatives from the House of Commons for all political parties and political parties in the North, and representatives from the House of Lords, who are all opposed to these proposals. But because of the majority that the Tory party has at the moment, although, you know, we've been telling the UK people for years just what the state is capable of, and you can see with what's happening currently between the Metropolitan Police and the Tory government that, you know, that there's something badly wrong in society at the moment. The one thing I do get comfort from is that what happened with the Miami Show Band case that went to court. My very good friend Stephen, who was representing himself and his band members, reached a settlement with the state. I know that Stephen would have gone to court, only he was afraid that with these Johnson proposals, that the rug would have been pulled out from underneath them and they'd never been able to hear that case. And it's a very difficult decision to make. But I know that Stephen wanted to go there and to hear the evidence. Liam talked about the Glenanne gang. I call them the Glenanne Regiment. A gang suggests, you know, a crowd of lads in a pub deciding some night to go out and murder somebody. It was not like that. You know, the centre of the Glenanne Regiment, as I call it, in South Armagh, was supported by police officers serving UDR and the army. along with loyalist paramilitaries. And that's just one element of it. But that gave me comfort because you can see that the evidence it amounted of, the government did not reach a massive settlement, 1.3, 1.4 million pounds, because they were not guilty. They reached that settlement because they did not want the evidence to be there in court. One of the things that I think that if you get to court, you'll have your day. I think gone are the days of Widgery and Lowry. You know, the justice system, in my view, if you can get there, has changed. Society has changed. But one of the very hurtful things for me was my mum is a native of Derry. She's on the call today. She's 83 years of age. To call my mother a vexatious claimant hurts badly. And there are many women like my mum across the north and further afield. And I want to just talk a wee bit about reconciliation. Reconciliation for me in a lot of places is not the right phrase. Reconciliation suggests that to start with, there was conciliation, and in a lot of cases there wasn't. But for some there was. In pockets there was conciliation. People, you know, lived and worked and played together. Most cases, most parts of the country, it was not like that. So moving forward for me, it's about conciliation, it's about understanding, it's about learning, it's about working together, but all of that will not be possible unless you have the truth. The truth will set us free. I believe that. I'd just like to cover another little point Liam covered, you know, in terms of truth recovery. In a lot of the cases that we know in the Troubles, the government slapped public interest immunity certificates on the cases. You get files and reports and statements produced that are redacted. They hide behind national security. They closed files for decades. For example, Eugene Reevy's brother's case is closed for 76 years. So the notion from Brandon Lewis that his proposals will allow for reconciliation and will just go to some truth recovery. Look me in the eye, Mr. Lewis, and tell me how you can give me truth when you've closed the files and you've slapped public interest immunity certificates on some of the evidence in the case. Talking to victims and survivors, nobody's ever spoken to me. Like Liam and other people on this call, we've had to go knocking and kicking doors to try and get truth and justice and support for our own cases. And I think if we all make a little bit of progress, it helps everybody else, because there are lots of people out there who don't have the will, the resources, who struggle to, you know, to get something going, to try and get a wee bit of truth. But Lewis has never spoken to us. And when I hear him talk on the news about, you know, talking to victims groups, no, you didn't. You haven't. You know, when we move ahead, it has to be based on what victims and survivors want, because this is not going to go away. I'm hopeful that the Irish government will continue to lobby in the background. I know that the British government have not been engaging the past couple of months. There's lots of good work going on in America. Myself and Stephen attended a couple of calls. There's lots of good work. Trade unions are supporting, you know, our opposition to the proposals. So I'm concerned, but I don't think we're without hope in terms of opposing what Johnson has proposed. But I also agree with Liam, when you look back and you think of what's happened, how old we all are now. We should not be here. I never wanted to be on a call like this. I'm sure Liam didn't, and anybody else who's been affected on this call. We just wanted to have normal lives. But we are not going to walk off into the darkness and forget about the people that we loved and that we lost. I think that's about it. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Joe, thank you very much. Can I just welcome your mother, Mrs. Campbell? You're very welcome on the call. So Joe, really what I'm taking out of what you're saying there is that trauma doesn't leave you. It gets worse every day of your life, and it's intergenerational, which I think I would know. But delay sullies democracy, and that the truth will set us free. In terms of what we are talking about, I think that's very pertinent. So that's everybody who has spoken. I'm going to throw it open to the floor. If anybody would like to ask a question of anybody who's involved, please type it into the chat box and we'll get the question and answers session underway. So is that happening? Have we any questions?
Sorry, and I've just been corrected there. My mum's not 83, she's 87.
You're very lucky.
I know.
But you never turn to word your mommy's mouth.
I'd say if I was sitting beside her, she'd clip my ear.
You never turn a word in your mommy's mouth, Joe. We all know that, no matter what age we are. So I'm just waiting now to see if there's any questions are going to come in here.
Just to say, I mean, I'm sure along with Liam, I'm happy to answer any question. Please don't be shy.
Stephen, are we waiting on these coming in? That's one of the beauties of Zoom. It's just not as immediate if we were in the room.
We haven't had any questions coming through yet.
No, I haven't. No. There's nothing has come into my chat box. No.
Catherine, can I just say?
Yes, Liam.
Well, I've never spoke to Joe before, you know, and
yeah.
While I was listening to Joe, I could feel the pain still there, and that sense of loss and injustice that adds to that loss, and it was very, very touching.
Yeah.
But he said something that, and I'd like him to respond to it if he can, because it's things I've thought about, particularly over the last week, and I thought, democracy. What do I see as democracy, and what my view of it is, and my view of democracy, which is probably very naive, but it's what I wanted, was a government that was in place to protect its citizens, to challenge the system that had made sure that the police services, the prosecution, not interfering, but would watch over them and make sure they'd done their job appropriately, and would be open and transparent themselves. And listen, maybe it's because my awareness came through the civil rights and what happened to my brother when he challenged that, and the other people who challenged that. And I got the same sense from Joe that he, thank God, has the same naivety as me, that what he's looking for, and it's not a lot to ask for ordinary people, they have a democracy that works like that. Yet we have seen constantly, and I've felt that from what you were saying too, and that's what we've come up against. The people, the politicians that we expect to do that are failing us day in and day out. And after 50 years and what's happened in this society, a lot of them politicians in place now are people who lived with us, who had the same view, but when they come under power, we're getting the same diatribe of, well, you have to understand, well, that's going to take longer, but you don't get it, you know, it's not as easy as that. And you know, I think that truth, justice and accountability is very, very easy. I have it every day in my home and in my community. You talk to your wife, you don't tell her lies, you assist, you help. And I think Joe was saying the same thing. And I think a lot of the politicians are playing games. I don't know what your experience was, that it's truth, justice and accountability, but in a party political case in a way, as far as we want to go, as how it advantages our progression rather than how it's advantageous and correct for everybody to get. So they play with us at times. And I've experienced that over the years, how they've used, and I have been used. I've seen our campaign used and abused by individual parties when it's good to be there and it's good to denigrate you, and when it's good to put you against another person who suffered an atrocity and a loss in their family. I was just wondering, did Joe have that experience too, or maybe it's just particularly me? I'm not sure.
Yes.
Have you a response, Joe? Would you have a response
Yes,
to Liam?
Catherine. Yeah, I think one of the really awful things that you see week on week is victims and survivors being used as political footballs. I think, you know, most of the victims and survivors groups that there are out there, most of them try to be apolitical. We certainly do anyway, because we just want to represent people's views, what people's needs are, what they want to see in the democracy. And then at that stage, of course, we need politicians to step in to try and make those things happen. But sadly, I think in the north at times, people disappear politically into their silos. You know, some of our politicians are not particularly generous of spirit in terms of what we want to achieve. And I think you're right, Liam, when you talk about the police, absolutely right. There has to be a police force in every society, but it has to be equitable, has to be even-handed, and there has to be the number one objective of the state is to protect its people. But when the state has been involved in murdering its people, that has to be resolved. Now, I just want to say a wee bit about my father. My father was a native of Rathmullen, lived in Scottstown, County Monaghan, and himself and his brother joined the RUC. They tried to join the Guards on the same day, but they had an embargo back in the 50s when they went to join up. He didn't join the police for any ideological reasons, but he joined to try and make a difference. You know, and being a Catholic police officer throughout his career was difficult for him for all sorts of reasons. And, you know, my father served in Moneymore, he served in Crossmaglen. When he moved from Crossmaglen, the local nationalist independent councillor got a petition together. 1,600 people signed a petition to try and get my father to try and change the police, the seniors' decision and keep him in Crossmaglen. So he was respected by all the community. They tried to make a difference. Now we ended up in you know, a little place that I call God's country up in the Glens of Antrim and Cushendall. I know my mother's a native of Derry, and she might give me a clip in here for that as well. But she's been in Cushendall for many years. But my father tried to do the right thing, and he reported activities that were going on between loyalists, paramilitaries, agents of the state, and the police. And he was murdered for it, for trying to make the difference. Now that sent a message out, and you know, my father's case was the subject of a police ombudsman's inquiry that lasted nearly 13 years. And at the end of it, the ombudsman was unable to say who committed the murder and why it was committed. And we know who committed it. Robin Jackson committed the jackal. I know that because I doorstepped the man. I know what he said in terms of trying to avoid what he was responsible for. But just a note on the ombudsman's inquiry. The chief constable at the time was approached by the ombudsman. He was still alive. He went on to become head of the Metropolitan Police. And when the police ombudsman's investigators knocked on his door and asked him, told him what they were doing, they were investigating my father's murder. What did he know about it? And bearing in mind that at the time, that chief constable had spoken to my mother in his private quarters in Knock headquarters in Belfast on 2 separate occasions. One when he was retiring, or when he was leaving the RUC. And the first time he told her that 2 officers had been questioned about my father's murder. He told them that he could not remember the case. It was the only case in the Troubles where one RUC officer was arrested and tried for the murder of a colleague. And he said that he couldn't remember the case. Right down through the ranks, there were 2 assistant chief constables who refused to cooperate with the investigation. When one of them, when the investigators knocked on his door in London, he told them to fuck off. And there were other officers down through the ranks who did not cooperate. Files went missing. Files were destroyed. There was a number of officers who did cooperate, but if I look at it in totality, my faith in democracy and what the police force was at that time was badly shaken. Yeah, badly shaken. So democracy has got to be based on the state defending its citizens, not murdering them. A police force that everybody can buy into, that's equitable, that's fair across all of society. And my father did all of those things, but he was murdered for it. So going forward, those are, the type of issues that we have to be talking about. And we have to understand each other better about how we can achieve that. And I agree absolutely with Liam said about democracy. Because just now, it just does not feel, and you think what the EU, the statement there with regard to European international human rights law and the obligations that the UK government has to them, and they're just riding roughshod over them. So you have to be concerned moving forward that if they got away with this stunt to avoid accountability and hide the truth, how we could move forward with any trust would be very, very difficult.
Thank you, Joe. There are a couple of questions coming in for both of you. Liam, this is for you. If we look, or Joe, if you want to answer to, if we look at the case of the Ballymurphy massacre campaign and their recent inquest, what are your views on where he believes the campaign should go next? So Liam or Joe?
Well, that's a tough one for
I
me.
take that to start with, if you want.
I think Liam's going to take it first,
No,
Joe, and then we'll
go ahead.
Grant, yeah,
I'll come
fine.
to you, Joe. I'll come to you, yeah.
No
Liam,
problem.
I love these conversations because I was going to let Joe go first, but I was going to say I'm very aware of the circumstances of the Ballymurphy families and where they're at, and you see the door being closed on them. And this is a difficulty for how do you advise people when my experience of 2 tribunals didn't bring out clarity and certainly didn't bring out the truth. As I told you, it closed the door on much of it. And sometimes the best that I can do, where you go next, you don't give up.
No.
You knock at every door. You talk to your politicians. I do it. I'm telling them, I'm not happy with you. You're not doing what you should be doing. Your justice committees, police committees, do something. Don't give me diatribes and platitudes. Do something. That's what I voted you in for. That's what you were telling me 20 years ago you're going to do. Do it. Point the finger. And the one thing, and it's very difficult to do at times, is you become crushed. You become, in a sense, nearly to a state of despair where you think, I've been knocking on that door so often, maybe I'm punch drunk. Because I've had some of my family, and they do this in a nice sense, so don't take it the wrong way, saying, oh, for God's sake, Liam, you're punch drunk yet. Why you keep, and they want to do the same. But it's such an effort, but it's worth it. And so what you do is you go again, you seek legal advice to see what avenues you can do, and you hound and you harry those in positions of power. You tell them what they're not doing, and you point at those who are guilty, and you just go to your bed at night, tired, but get up the next morning and just say, I'm at it again, one step in front of the other. And I know it's not great advice, but it's all I know to do.
So you're tired of diatribes and platitudes, Liam? Joe, what would you advise the Ballymurphy people?
Yes, I absolutely agree with Liam there. You know, pats on the shoulders and you know, cups of tea are, you know, don't cut it. They never did. But you know, you always hope that round the corner something, by talking to people, something positive would come out of it. And I think we have to rely on our politicians to get off their backsides and to murder is wrong wherever it comes from. Murder is wrong. You cannot have an amnesty for murder in any society. Doesn't work, never worked in any other country. In
To do that deliberately.
work here. UK is not.
How do you
The UK is not acceptable in that regard. So our politicians have got to step up and just say, look, this needs to be dealt with. This is not going to go away. Liam's absolutely right. You know, we've got, you know, 2 and 3 generations on, you know, our children, our grandchildren, they want to know what happened to their grandmother, their grandfather, you know, their uncle, you know, their cousins, their families. They deserve the truth. Society deserves the truth. Our country deserves the truth. Social media is going to be a big thing going forward, because many of the stories that we talk about would not have got the coverage but for social media. So I think we have to continue to bring our stories to people across social media. I think it's just a shame that we can't be coordinated a bit better. I know we're all doing work on our own little groups and our own silos, but I think we'd be a much powerful unit if we could pool our resources, you know, in terms of our strategies. And the Ballymurphy people, I mean, I know John well. John was on the group with me with the House of Commons. And if you reflect that John and his fellow campaigners for Ballymurphy had to do all the work themselves. They had to investigate the case themselves. They took statements from all of the eyewitnesses, you know, and then those statements got translated into the legal format that's required, so that those statements could be taken forward as evidence in criminal and civil cases. So I would be taking civil actions. I would be going into court again if I was the Ballymurphy people. You know, and what is noticeable from the Ballymurphy campaign when you see the people speak is the decency and the honesty and the integrity of the people, just the same as all of the other, you know, most of the other campaign groups that I know. So you have to take your hat off to them, but it comes back to this thing about a democracy where, you know, people were murdered by the state and the relatives and friends of those people had to go out and investigate the case. What does that say about, you know, a country that sets itself up to be one of the leading democracies in the world? It just ranks me sometimes when I hear them talking about, you know, things that are happening in other places around the world, you know, and they're avoiding accountability and truth for things they were responsible for in their own country. So I would say you go civil, you go criminal if you can get it, and you keep going.
Thank you, Joe. There's another question for both of you. The theme of this year's March is there's no British justice. If that is the case, is it time for constitutional change on the island? And if so, how do we ensure that any new state is not as corrupt as the current one? That shouldn't take too long to discuss. Liam, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, well, that's an easy one now. Well,
And
how
you
do we
said,
go forward?
nice easy one, new state is not as corrupt as the current one.
Well, you see, that's what I was saying from earlier, that 50 years on, I think we're in a worse position than we started out from. And I've given this a bit of thought, just, I'm not an academic, I'm not very clever in words, but I would sit at home at night and I think, why do I want all these things addressed? And why do I want justice for Jim and for Joe and for all the other victims? And the reason is because I want a society where my children and my grandchildren can grow up and I can feel and they can feel that they're safe. Now, my honest view is this: we're fighting an establishment, and the democracies we have, maybe this, in my view, this is how I feel the democracy we have does not work. And the reason it doesn't work is this, and people mightn't like it, but this is how I see it. From the police to the PPS to the judiciary, right up to our politicians. What they've been doing so far, I can say this assuredly, hasn't worked. It's failed. It's failed the people throughout the 50 years. They played games with us. So how do you break that? And I'm looking and I'm saying, what we really need, no matter what we get going forward, we should have an election. Every time we elect politicians, we should have an election to bring in a separate body that's not in Parliament, but of ordinary people, not solicitors, not doctors, not the creme de la creme. Ordinary people from Ballymurphy, from Cushendall, Cushendun, Ballymena, the Bogside. 12 jurors, as you might call them. And they sit and they look and they can say to judges, you're not fit for your job. How did you come to that? We're not picking on legal basis. We're saying common sense dictates that has to be done, or you're not fit for a position. You watch where your judges come from. Yeah, many times I've been at court, even during the Soldier F committal hearings, when an ex-RUC special branch man comes in, and the Judge McGill says to him right away, he's coming in for defence for Soldier F in regards to anonymity, well, they should remain anonymous or not. And of my recollection, Greg McGill, oh, how you do? I'll not mention his name just out of dignity, and because it's not that way. Oh, how you do? Oh, you've been up before me before, and you're an expert on this. And right away, the thing's framed that this boy knows what he's talking about. No matter what the family say, he's an expert. You don't count. And he came up there and he said, we had said that Soldier F's name was on the internet for years. Right. And this alleged expert that Judge McGill just thought was the bee's knees, and you've been up for me before, says, well, he couldn't find it, and that was just it. You understand me? That's where you as an ordinary person, that's what we become. I'm saying when we go into courts and those places, when we go to these bodies, right, they don't see us as part of them. They are above us. When we see that forensic analysis, we would assume, I was so naive, I assumed that forensic experts, and really annoys me, particularly in regards to Bloody Sunday and Dr. John Merton's paraffin test that tried to blacken my brother's reputation, when he comes in 28 years later and says the dog ate me homework. And that's what he basically said, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm going, how did he get away with that? And why did he do it? And the reason I suspect when he done it, it's very interesting reading if you ever have a chance to look at what Judge Toohey asked him why he didn't tell Lord Woodbury that his test had been manipulated, that it wasn't defined that people fire guns. It's very interesting. I'm not going into detail about it, but it opened my eyes. As an ordinary person, I'm sure as Joe was and anybody else knows, I assumed that these forensic experts would be independent and full of integrity, but they're not. They're part of the establishment. They lean towards trying to prove something that the state wants proved. They're covered. The very pathologists, every one of the victims on Bloody Sunday was shot at a distance of greater than 30 feet. My brother was shot the second time from a distance of about 4 or 5 feet. How did they come to that conclusion? And then you start as an ordinary human being going, you start to question these people and you start to question their motives. And I don't say they're all bad people. I'm not saying that. There are some of them are awful people. I'm saying that as well. But what they are, they know how to support each other. They are different. Like every policeman, no disrespect to you, to your father, they are decent human beings in the police. There was 200 of them in Hillsborough, had their statements. They let them be changed. How could 200 police officers do that? What credibility do I have, or what faith and confidence do I have in those people? So what I'm saying is, you have to wonder, why do these people do this? And they do it, some of the police officers do it, they get up the greasy pole, because that's what they're expected. You don't break your chain of command. You don't do this. So you, as an ordinary people, we have to fight that. If we want a new democracy that is sensible, that is going to be clean, I think we need ordinary people in a different scenario that are over and above all these bodies and can have a say. If we're dependent on judges, top policemen, and these people to be independent and to be equitable and to be, we're fools. And sounds crazy, but that's how I see it.
Thank you, Liam. Joe, what would your
Yeah.
comments be?
Yeah, Catherine, it's a fantastic question. It's fair play to whoever asked the question. I would, but you know, in fairness, I mean, I'm here to answer it as best I can. But the first thing about, you know, whether the, you know, constitutional change is required, the new state is not as corrupt as the old. I think you have to sweep up everything that has gone wrong so far. And for me, if you go back to the Good Friday Agreement and you know, when it was signed, what was absent from the Good Friday Agreement was what we now know as, and I hate using these terms, but those are the terms that are there, legacy issues. We're identified as legacy issues. Good God, it doesn't give it its true seriousness and the impact and the impact it's having on society and the relationship that we have socially, economically, politically going forward. So I think you have to go back at that and say, well, you excluded victims, right? You have to deal with that. And for me, the only way to deal with that properly is to have an international, independent body to investigate all of these issues. Now, people will say, the government will say, we don't have the money. Listen, they had £36 billion to throw down the drain on a test, track and trace system that didn't work. PPI contracts for friends, relatives, and people say, oh, you're talking about, but those are the facts. The money is there if the will is there. Yeah. So I think you have to do that. I think the other thing that we should not shy away from this is commemoration. This is a respectful forum that is with commemoration and recognition of what happened in the past. Sure, beyond the wit of all the groups in Northern Ireland to understand that we have to go forward commemorating things that happened, lives that were lost, but in a respectful way. And I talk about flags, I talk about symbols right across society. Those things, that's not in my DNA. I don't need to fly a flag to tell people who I am and what I believe in and what my family and my community and my country believe in. So I think we have to deal with those issues. And they have to be done independently from outside bodies. The police force, in the recent past, the Metropolitan Police Force was identified as institutionally corrupt. Institutionally corrupt. Yeah. So clearly there's a lot of work to do there, but there has to be a police force, but it has to be a police force that represents everybody and that everybody can have trust in. And I understand that for historical and current reasons, a lot of people don't have that, and that's understandable. So we have to work out a way where that's, that changes and everybody can buy into it. We're all brought up to understand the difference between right and wrong. We need to build in the principles. Where's the best model in the world? How did that happen? How did they make it happen? Let's do it. We're not exceptional. Sorry, the UK government is not exceptional. They believe that they are. So everybody's got to have, you've got a society where we learn about each other, we accommodate everybody, where everybody's got the same opportunities, where there's fairness. And we have to demand more of our politicians. Please, when it comes to election time, let's not disappear into the silos. Let's demand more of our politicians in advance of elections and say, as a society going forward, and if there's going to be constitutional change, what is it that you're going to do to make that a positive experience for all the citizens of the island?
Thank you, Joe. There is a wee, and just on the back of that, there is a wee question about, should the PSNI be the agency that investigates what you described as legacy cases? Joe, do you think they'd be a suitable body?
No.
No.
Not at all. Not from my experience. I don't think for lots and lots of people that the trust is there, whether it's right or it's not. I know my experience. And, you know, I say that the disappointing thing for my family was that, you know, so many officers did not feel it right, moral, humane to tell the truth about what happened to a colleague, to my father. And I think there are still lots of connections there. For me, investigating legacy should be an independent international body.
Liam, what do you think, Liam? Would the PSNI be the agency that should investigate legacy cases? Would your view on that be?
Not at all. We've seen with the HET, the falseness of it, because there's agendas there and there's protectionism there. And the same thing as we're saying about these bodies. If you had people at the top, like the chief constable or assistant chief constable or inspectors, that were saying to their men and watching and checking on how they were doing. But what you have was from the top, them telling their officers below them, they keep still to protect their reputation. They don't do that. So it's the opposite. I'm serious. Like if a policeman asked me, if I was walking down the street today and the policeman asked me the time, I wouldn't tell him. That's my view of the PSNI. Went through 3 years of them telling me in the city hotel, them, now, when we asked them questions about, have you interviewed Soldier F? Have you put him under caution? Have you removed his passport in case he moves abroad? Oh, trust us, we're doing a great job. Every question we asked them, all they asked you was, do you trust them? And they've done a useless job as ever. I can't see them files. I can't see what investigations they've done. The only, and I can't say it now because there's not a matter going on with it. The only time, apart from that, I had anything from the RUC, or I still call them the RUC, the PSNI, was when they come up to annoy me over the case. And I thought to myself, you know, here I am. I'm too thick-skinned to be troubled by, you know what I mean. And I'm glad it was through COVID. I'll tell you why, because they came to the front door and it says, come on the back. Because it's you mightn't be sanitized, and I know they weren't sanitized now, you know what I mean? So no, I have no confidence in the PSNI. I have little or no confidence in the PPS, because and this is the thing that people should be aware of. About 3 or 4 years ago, the director, not the director of public, the Attorney General was publicly saying we should be drawing a line in the sand.
Yes.
You know, people forget that the Attorney General, he basically, I know he's not the PPS, he's in charge of all that. So when you're seniors, when the people most senior in the country, legal people in the country, who advise government and all about your city, and they're saying, oh, draw a line in the sand. We're an embarrassment. We're a thorn in their side. And the way they try to defeat us is they put victim against victim. I've seen it here in this town with Gregory Campbell going, but what about? No, that's fine. You can say that was wrong, and I'll agree, but don't take away where there's an opportunity for people to get an answer by saying, oh, they didn't get an answer, so don't, and they create a fight and a hierarchy, or try to create that falseness. And the police service don't help that either. So we're in a difficult situation. It's very refreshing me to hear Joe, because I've never heard Joe before. And Joe's just an ordinary Joe, like Liam's an ordinary Joe, who has been a victim of the rottenness in this society. And we're concerned because the rottenness is still there. And we're hoping for a brand new day. And it'd be great if we can team up sometime, Joe, in the future, even if it's only just be friends and buddies, we're a shared experience. I really appreciated listening to you today, Joe, and I'll be at an anniversary master night for me, brother, and I'll keep your damn me prayers.
Liam, look, Liam, thank you for that. My father's anniversary is next week. I think now I know my mother will be saying a prayer for everybody after the call today, and so again, I'm humbled even to be here to talk, to commemorate such an event. Because of all our experiences, I think we've all matured and we've learned things, you know. And I think when we look back, we look at the enormity of what happened. And it's like I've known Liam forever, because when you've been involved in what we have, the empathy is automatic within 30 seconds of meeting somebody.
Yeah.
And we try to take the goodness out of that and share it around because it helps everybody day by day.
Thank you, Joe. There's another question here for both of you. Whoever wants to answer it first, just let me know. Does the panel feel that the press media in particular are failing victims? Only last week, a commander in the Red Hand Commando admitted he received montages, names and addresses of citizens from the security forces in what seemed to amount to a kill list. Yet this radio interview went largely unreported in the press. So have you a view on the press, Liam or Joe, and their role in supporting victims?
Well, yes, I mean, I would have a view in the press, not just in supporting victims, because I was standing. One of the initiatives that we had in the cross community group was myself, Michael Gallagher, Eugene Reevy, Julie Hambleton, who represents the Birmingham bombing families, John Taggart, McManus represent his father. When we were standing inside the gates of 10 Downing Street and the cameras were flashing and everything, and I said to Eugene, I said, this is not my place. I'm not comfortable here. And then we had another conversation with Michael Gallagher. I said to Michael, do you know something? That this will not go out in the BBC News. It won't go out in the ITV News, Channel 4 News. It will not be in any of the papers in the morning. And I was right. So the coverage of what's been happening since 1966, 65, there were many good journalists, but there were many who didn't tell the truth and who were part of the black propaganda that came from military intelligence and accepted what military intelligence said. Now, the issue about that is that once you put that into the public arena, that this is what happened, it takes 40, as with the Ballymurphy families and the lies that were told, and the lies that were told about the people on Bloody Sunday, and the lies that were told about my father, it takes 40 or 50 years to change people's minds about what happened with the facts, because the established facts were what the state said. So there are many people who can take a lot of credit, but there are many people who haven't done the thing justice. And for those people who say, sure, just put that all behind you, sure, forget it all. And some journalists I've heard say that too. They do themselves a massive, they don't do themselves a favor. Martin O'Hagan, some of you know, Martin O'Hagan was one of my very good friends. Martin O'Hagan was murdered because he was exposing lots of things that were wrong in society. No one's ever been convicted of Martin's murder. Martin was a journalist. We had a history. Martin was exposing many of the things that went wrong. I don't see many journalists today opposing what has happened. They're few and far between. But it comes back to the democracy thing again. And if you want to move forward, there has to be a free press. And I see that some journalists who speak out with regard to initiatives that are happening across the country are being ridiculed dangerously by people. It's wrong. So we need a free press, but we need people to take responsibility, establish the facts and get the facts out there. I don't think it always happens.
Thank you, Joe. Liam, what was your view on the press? Supportive or not?
Well, it's a two-edged sword, I suppose. I think back in the early days, the Sunday Times article shortly after Bloody Sunday exposed the lies of the, to the degree that the British government and the military put out. There are, as Joe has said, there are some very good investigative journalists. I think that both government in its own way is trying to put pressure on them in the sense of trying to limit what they can say. And I think also that some of the media, not all of them, some of the media outlets now have their own agendas. Simple as that, some of them are conservative, pro-state, Labour, whatever. So it's a mishmash of what there is. I do appreciate those that did help in many ways. And so I wouldn't have no other view. A lot of it depends on the integrity of that journalist himself. We've got some stuff that you know that journalist is taking the information and they know when they're doing it from multiple sources. They're doing a particular story in a line. We've seen that when straight after Bloody Sunday, when it went around the world and all news were pulling out gunmen and bombers. What I'm saying, there have been very good journalists, and we need them. A democracy needs independent, that sort of investigative journalists, because being honest, a lot of them have brought a lot of stuff to the fore. But at the end of the day, where you get the most truth is from is people, families digging, prodding, poking, scratching about, trying to find information themselves. But no, as a mishmash of late, I thought the BBC, I've had question marks about their way they've been handling things over a period of time. I thought they were at one time a far better service than they are today. They seem to be very government controlled today. So in that respect, yes, there were some very brave and good journalists, and some put themselves in positions that could have got themselves under harm, and I appreciate that. And that's all I want to say in the journalism.
Thank you, Liam. Somebody has just sent in a wee message to both of you. Not a question, but your dignity and persistence, Liam and Joe, in your fights for justice is inspirational. Somebody in the audience has just sent that in. I don't have any more questions. Does anybody want to ask anything more of Liam and Joe? Oh, no sooner said. Boris Johnson's proposals have galvanized society here in opposition to them. So what form of action should people take, and groups, what form of action should people and groups take in the weeks and months ahead against these proposals? Joe, would you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, it's simple terms. Lobby your local MP, whoever it is, your political representatives that you oppose them and that you oppose the proposals, and you want your political representative to be vocal about that, whether that's in the House of Commons, whether that's in the local councils, whether that's in media interviews. The issue I have is that with the majority, Brandon Lewis can stand up, and some may say he's telling lies, that his proposals are going to somehow have us all dancing around a maypole and reconciling. But so that's just clearly untrue. So it jumps back to the last question about the press. The press need to challenge them on that. There's nothing worse than when you hear somebody being interviewed on TV and you know that some of the facts that they're speaking about are not facts and actually lies. So we want people challenging that, but for me it has to be through the political. And anybody who knows anybody in the Irish government or connections to it, or the USA government, for me the decision would spin on how much pressure the USA puts on Johnson, because he needs a trade deal. He's been told that Biden has told him that any tampering with the Good Friday Agreement would not be treated kindly. So anybody who knows anybody with connections to the US government, the Irish government, through your politicians, for me, that's the way to do it.
Thank you, Joe. Liam, what would you say?
I just agree with you on that matter, and say there's not much more I can add to that.
Okay. Rose has sent in a message for both of you again. So thank you, Joe and Liam. There's an old saying, nothing is lost that comes from love. So despite all the many obstacles you have faced and continue to face, you're making a difference for many people, challenging corrupt systems, speaking truth to power, and living in solidarity. Respect to both of you and to the others who are with you. And Sarah has asked a question, quite a pertinent question. Do you think that victims groups are properly funded? Liam and Joe. So the funding issue.
I have a difficulty with when you call victims groups being funded.
Yeah.
Because I feel that number one, there's some victims groups are very organized in a political sense, and that all the victims aren't really heard within that. And I'm very dubious where the funding comes from and in what way. Let's be serious. If the state is funding victim groups, I get concerned.
Okay.
You understand me? Because
Yes.
the man that pays the piper calls the tune, and that's been my experience. That's all I'll say in that matter.
Okay, Liam. Joe, what was your views on that? Be?
I'm very conscious that, you know, I have lots of friends across all, you know, all groups, but you know, there are groups out there that are funded very, very well, that do fantastic work for victims and survivors, victims who suffered, you know, physical and mental issues, and they do fantastic work supporting those people with lots of therapies, lots of initiatives. Some of the victims groups are political. That's clear. I think that's understandable in some cases, but I think also some of the groups are afraid to speak out because they think that it might affect their funding. The people that I'm involved with, you know, the TaRP, for example, we get a small bit of funding from the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Irish government for the work that we do, but we're non-political. But I think that if we were funded properly, there's lots of good work that we could do in terms of conciliation moving forward. So no, I don't think they're all funded. I don't understand how the funding works, but good luck to anybody who's truly supporting victims and survivors. But there's lots of us out there who could do an awful lot more good work if we had the funding.
Okay. Well, I don't think there are any more questions. I think we would just wrap it up there. Personally, I would like to thank Liam, yourself and Joe for your contributions today. They've been amazing. I would like to thank the Bloody Sunday March Committee and the Truth and Reconciliation platform as well, and everybody who joined us online. Thank you very much. It's been a moving event and a learning experience. So on behalf of myself, thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Take you care.
Bye, Joe. See you
Care,
later.
Joe.
Hopefully.
See you all the best, Liam, and everybody else who attended. Thanks for listening.
Thank you now.